I ran. The hallway stretched like a tunnel, bright lights humming above me, clean air biting the back of my throat. Rubber soles slapped linoleum. The smell of disinfectant rose like a warning. I clutched my purse to my ribs and counted room numbers under my breath. 308, 310, 312. I was 66 and I moved like a woman twice that age and a woman half that age all at once. Fear will do that. Steals years and gives you wings. My son was somewhere ahead behind a door I had not yet reached. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to hold on. My hand reached for the next handle when a grip found my forearm and pulled me sideways with quiet force. I gasped. A palm rose to my mouth but did not press. A voice fell against my ear, low and steady. Hide and wait. Trust me. She wore scrubs the color of calm water. Her eyes were bright and unafraid. She nudged open the half-lit room beside us and guided me in. The door clicked. The blinds were drawn. An empty bed faced the window. A monitor blinked a quiet green pulse. I pressed my back to the cool wall and tried to make sense of the command I had just obeyed. Hide and wait. From what? From whom? My heart knocked hard enough to rattle my teeth. Listen, the nurse whispered. Then she slipped away, footsteps soft and certain. Voices drifted from the hall, and from the next room where light leaked under the frame. One voice was a woman, sweet at the edges, thin at the center. The other was a man, smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that signs papers for a living. Are you sure no one will see us here? She laughed without warmth. The old woman is on her way. Security is slow with people like her. We have time. Good, the man said. Confirm the documents again. The transfer of the house must be ready before he wakes. If he asks questions, you will say he signed last week. Your story is simple. The house. My house once. The place I bought after Walter died. I signed my son on because I trusted him and because love often looks like a signature. I thought we were building a future. I did not know a future could be used as a tool. What about the business? The woman asked. The funds in the joint account. The ones his mother added when he started. Technically complicated, the man replied. But if he remains under sedation or shows impairment, we can request temporary guardianship. With that we can access everything. Properties. Accounts. Investments. I closed my eyes and saw my boy at 6 with a paper crown. Some memories do not ask permission. They arrive and sit down. I open my eyes and press my palm to the wall. Say less. Watch more. Keep the receipt. Paper rustled. The woman lowered her voice, and what she said next cut the room in two. I have been giving him a little each morning in his juice. Only a pinch. He looks tired. The doctors nod. No one suspects a thing. Here it is easier. When the nurses step out, I touch the line. 2 or 3 more days and it will be done. His heart will not fight me. I did not cry. I did not scream. I went still the way an animal goes still when the brush moves and the sound is not the wind. The man spoke with care. Do not text anything. Do not search for anything. I will send the last items tonight. Sign and return. If he does not wake by Friday, we proceed with the petition. You will be free. Free. The word hung like a stain. I thought of my son's hands at work and the way he tipped his head when he tried to listen harder. I thought of the trust it takes to put your name next to someone else's name on a deed and on a hope. Footsteps shifted. A door eased shut across the hall. My legs went weak, then held. My breath came back. I watched the soft green blink and told myself to keep standing. The door opened without a sound and the nurse slipped in again. She turned on a lamp no brighter than a candle. Breathe, she said. Breathe with me. In and out. The air was thin and then it was enough. My name is Letitia, she said. I need you to trust me a little longer. Your son is in 312. He is stable for this moment. What you heard is real. I have been watching her for a week. I think she has been hurting him slowly. I think she planned to finish it here. My hands found each other and held tight. How do you know? How can you be sure? Patterns, she said. Symptoms that do not match the file. Numbers that drift. A bag that reads one dose and gives another. Cameras that see what no one expects. I brought this to a doctor who will listen. He is running tests. We need time and we need you to act like you know nothing. Can you do that? I looked at her and saw a woman who had decided truth mattered more than comfort. I nodded. Good. Go in when you are ready. Touch his hand. Speak to him. She will be in the chair by the bed. She will study your face for any sign. Give her none. I will speak with security and with the doctor. If my test is right, we will call the police. We need her to stay until they arrive. One more thing, she said softly. Do not tell your son yet. Not until we have proof in our hands. He may not believe you. Let me carry the hard part for a while. I nodded again. Gratitude and rage pressed at my throat. Letitia cracked the door and checked both directions. Clear, she said. You are not alone. I left the room. I stood outside 312 and pressed my palm to the metal. I thought about the women in my family who had walked into rooms where decisions were already in motion and found a way to change the ending. I went in. The room was cool. A monitor sang a soft high line. And 4-bag hung like a lantern. My son lay pale and still. I took his hand and it felt heavier than it had any right to be. Across from me sat a woman in a cream dress. She stood with careful grace and reached for me. Doris, she said. Thank you for coming. I know this is hard. Her perfume was floral and expensive. Her eyes were steady. What happened? I asked. My voice shook. She told a gentle story about stress and skipped meals and a collapse at work. She said the next 2 days were important. She said if he woke he might need rest. She touched his arm with the back of her hand. I leaned close to my son and spoke into the air around him. I told him I was here. I told him I was not going anywhere. I told him I loved him and that love had a job to do today. The woman offered to get me tea. I thanked her and said I would stay. She settled into her chair. Her gaze slid to the fore and back. I tucked every detail into the part of my mind that files what matters. Letitia passed the window with a cart. Her eyes found mine and flicked down like a nod. Hide and wait is not surrender. It is strategy. It is faith with a plan. Time moved slow. A nurse came in and checked the monitor and left. A shadow crossed the doorway. Letitia stood in it with a clipboard. Mrs. Ingram, she said. The doctor would like a word in private. Only a few minutes. The woman stiffened. Her smile held. I kissed my son on the temple and followed Letitia into a consultation room with a chair and a lamp. We found it, Letitia said. The test is positive. The doctor is on the call to the police right now. We will keep her in place. We need 20 minutes. Can you do 20 minutes? Yes, I said. My voice belonged to me again. I will do 20 minutes. I will do what it takes. Letitia squeezed my hand once. I see you, she said. Then she led me back down the bright hall toward the door that held my heart, and the woman who planned to break it. The door closed behind me, and the soft hum of the hospital swallowed every thought. Scarlett sat across the bed with her legs crossed, a notebook open on her lap, pretending to journal. I looked at her profile and thought of how deception can wear kindness like perfume. She glanced up and smiled at me. Would you like some water, Doris? Her voice was honey, her eyes measured. I shook my head. No, thank you. I just want to sit with him. I took Robert's hand again. The chill had eased, but there was no weight of response. I rubbed the back of his hand slowly, just as I did when he was a child, feverish after a long day of summer play. I used to hum a hymn to calm him. Now I hum to keep myself from falling apart. Scarlett leaned forward and said softly, He'll wake soon. He's strong. Her tone was so even that anyone else might have believed her. But I could still hear the echo of her voice from the hallway, the way she had said, He won't fight me. That voice carried no love, only calculation. A nurse entered, adjusted the foredrip, checked the monitor and left. Scarlett's eyes followed the nurse, sharp and wary. I noted it. Every move became evidence now. Letitia's voice replayed in my mind. Act like you know nothing. I stared at the 4-bag. Clear liquid. Innocent to the eye. Lethal in silence. Scarlett stood and smoothed her dress. I'll go freshen up, she said. Would you mind keeping an eye on him? I nodded, holding my breath until she left. When the door clicked shut, I leaned close to my son. Baby, I'm here, I whispered. I'm right here. He did not move, but a faint sound escaped him. A slow exhale, a reminder that breath was still his. I pressed my forehead to his hand. You hear me, Robert. You hold on. You fight. The memory hit without warning. Robert at 12, sitting on the kitchen floor with a broken model airplane. He had cried then too, ashamed of tears, ashamed of failure. I had crouched beside him, picked up the tiny wing and said, "There's no shame in fixing what's worth keeping." That same sentence returned now like a prophecy. The door opened again. Scarlett walked in with a paper cup and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You must be exhausted," she said. "Go rest. I can stay the night." Her generosity dripped false. I smiled gently. "I think I'll stay a bit longer. I want to pray over him." Scarlett nodded. "Of course. I'll step out and make some calls." When she left this time, Letitia slipped in, eyes darting to the hall. She placed a small folded note into my hand. "Stay calm. Doctor confirms traces. Police on site soon. Don't alarm her." I nodded. She squeezed my shoulder once and left as quietly as she had entered. I tucked the note into my sleeve and turned my eyes back to the forebag. For the first time, I noticed a faint residue around the connection tube, like a thin film that caught the light. My stomach twisted. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see. Scarlett returned 10 minutes later, pretending surprised to see me still there. "You haven't eaten all day, have you?" "I'll eat when I can taste peace," I said quietly. She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I looked straight into her eyes. "Nothing important. Just an old saying." That was when her phone buzzed. Her face shifted, fear then composure. She turned away to answer. "Yes," she whispered. "Everything is ready. He's stable. We can proceed after visiting hours." She didn't notice the small reflection in the four-pole. A mirror of her lips moving, her tone low, dangerous. I made a choice. I pulled out my phone, pretending to scroll. My recorder app blinked silently. Her voice slid through the air. "The transfer needs his ID. I have it in the drawer. His mother will be gone soon anyway. She's a mess." I kept breathing. Quiet. Measured. Like Letitia said. When she hung up, she sighed softly and turned to me. "These hospitals make you think too much," she said. "I might go home and shower." "You do that," I replied. "He's in good hands now." She walked out. Her heels clicked down the hall like punctuation marks of deceit. The door shut, and the room felt lighter. I leaned back and let the tears come quietly. Betrayal does not explode, it leaks. It seeps through kindness and words of care until the room you stand in no longer feels like your own. My mind slipped back to the night before the wedding. Walter had been alive then, strong, sure. He told me, "You never stop being a mother, Doris. Even when they marry, even when they say they don't need you, keep your eyes open." I had laughed then, thinking he was being dramatic. Now I saw the truth. Every woman in my family had faced betrayal in some shape. My mother with my father's gambling. My aunt with the neighbor who borrowed too much and paid back too little. Each of them found a way to rise, quietly but fully. The next hours blurred. Nurses changed shifts. Letitia passed by twice, always calm, always watching. Near midnight, I went to the chapel downstairs. It was empty except for the faint scent of candle wax. I sat in the second pew and whispered to the silence, "Lord, I don't need thunder. I just need clarity." In that still space, I remembered the archives I once managed for the county office. Years of cataloging deeds, birth records, affidavits, truth bound in paper. I had spent a lifetime filing other people's evidence. Now, for the first time, I would need to file my own. When I came back upstairs, Letitia met me at the door. "We have it," she said under her breath. "Traces confirmed. Dr. Stevens sent samples to toxicology. We're locking down supply access." "What now?" "Now we wait," she said. "And we gather." Gather. That word gave me purpose. Over the next day, I moved like a ghost through the corridors. Scarlett thought I was frail, distracted. She didn't see the small notepad I carried or the way I noted every time she entered the room without a nurse present. At 10:14 a.m., she adjusted the 4-line. At 11:27, she whispered something to Robert and smiled. At 1:05, she stepped out for a call. 10 minutes exactly. Letitia winked when she passed me a folded envelope from the nurse's station. Inside were 2 printed photos from security footage. Scarlett bending over the 4, one hand hidden. Time-stamped. Clear. Proof. Still, the ache in my chest would not quiet. Seeing evidence did not soften the betrayal. It sharpened it. Late that evening, I caught sight of myself in the window. My reflection looked older, thinner, but steadier. Behind me, my son's monitors beeped, each pulse a metronome of survival. Scarlett entered again, phone in hand. She placed a folder on the side table and smiled. "It's almost over," she said softly. "You'll see. We'll all be free soon." She turned away, humming a tune that scraped against the silence. I watched her leave and thought, freedom wears many faces. When the door closed, I whispered, "Not all silence is weakness." The line tasted like steel and prayer together. That night I barely slept. I wrote everything down, time, tone, gestures. My hand cramped but my heart steadied. By dawn, Letitia came in and set a cup of coffee beside me. "You did good," she said. "The police are almost ready. They want her here when they come." I nodded, feeling the weight of hours pressing forward. The story of betrayal was nearly complete, but justice had just begun. Outside the window, the sun climbed slow and golden. I thought of Walter again, of what he would say. Maybe that some truths come late, but they still come right on time. Robert's fingers twitched. Just once. Promise wrapped in motion. I leaned forward and whispered, "Hold on, son. Hold on just a little longer." That was the first moment I believed we might actually win. The next morning began with stillness, the kind that feels like the air is waiting for news. The monitors pulsed soft and rhythmic. Robert's color had shifted slightly, warmth creeping back into his cheeks. I stood by the window watching the morning light spill across the floor, and I told myself, today is for facts. No more wondering. Letitia arrived just after 7. She wore a pale blue cardigan instead of her uniform, signaling she was off duty but still on mission. She closed the door quietly behind her and handed me a manila folder. "These are copies of everything we've gathered so far," she said. "Lab reports, staff notes, timestamps from security footage. Dr. Stevens will testify if needed." I sat down and ran my fingers across the edges of the papers. 4 years I had filed records for other people, births, deaths, marriages, deeds. Now my own life was evidence in motion. "Scarlett hasn't noticed yet?" I asked. "Not yet," Letitia said. "She's too confident. People like her believe silence means surrender." I nodded. "Then let's stay quiet a little longer." At 8:30, Scarlett entered. Perfume strong enough to mark her presence. Her hair was styled, her lipstick perfect. Too much effort for a woman with a husband in recovery. She smiled at me as though yesterday had never happened. "How's our patient?" she asked lightly, sliding her phone into her coat pocket. "Our patient is resting," I said. "He's strong." She nodded and adjusted the blanket on Robert's legs. "He always was," she murmured, "even when he didn't know what was best for him." The words struck harder than they should have. I tucked the reaction inside me. Letitia's voice echoed in my head. "Record, don't react." I pressed the record button on my phone under the table. Scarlett began humming, her tune oddly cheerful. She looked at the 4 bag and frowned. "Did someone change his dosage?" she asked. "The doctors did," I answered, meeting her gaze evenly. "They said the last mix wasn't right." Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something close to fear flash across them. "Oh," she said quickly. "Good. I'm glad they're watching closely." She turned toward the window, but I could see her reflection in the glass. Her hand moved subtly toward her pocket, pulling out her phone. I heard a soft click, photo maybe, or message. Either way, a mistake. I smiled to myself and whispered inside my mind, "Every move, baby. Every move." By noon, Dr. Stevens called me into the hallway. He was a tall, calm man with kind eyes that could see too much. "Mrs. Ingram," he said, "I wanted to inform you that we've confirmed the presence of certain agents in your son's bloodstream, something that shouldn't be there. We're working with law enforcement now. Your nurse Letitia has been instrumental. Will my son recover?" I asked. He hesitated. "We think so. But it depends on the dosage and how long it's been going on." "How long?" I asked again. "Likely weeks." Weeks. The word punched air out of me. All the dinners at their house. The way Scarlett insisted he cut sugar, caffeine, wine. The quiet control disguised as care. It had been building brick by brick right in front of me. Dr. Stevens touched my shoulder gently. "You've done the right thing by staying alert. Doing the right thing doesn't feel right yet, I whispered. It just feels heavy. He nodded. Justice usually does. When I returned to the room, Scarlett was on the phone, pacing. No, I told you, she hissed quietly. He's not dying yet. Stop asking. I'll text when. She froze when she saw me. Her smile reappeared instantly. Just talking to the insurance, she said. You know how complicated things get. I didn't answer. I just sat down, opened my notebook and began to write in steady looping script. 10:37 a.m. Scarlett pacing. Phone conversation. Mentions insurance but tone urgent. Defensive when interrupted. 10:42 a.m. Calls ended. Silence. Watches for. She tried to peek over my shoulder. What are you writing? She asked. My gratitude list, I said. It keeps me centered. Her brow furrowed slightly, unsure if it was mockery or faith. That uncertainty gave me the smallest bit of power back. That afternoon, Letitia returned with a second folder, labeled police copy. Inside were photos, printed emails, and a single recorded transcript. Scarlett made several calls to an attorney named Mark Delgado, she explained. He's under review for multiple probate fraud cases. Looks like they plan to file guardianship papers this Friday. So soon, I whispered. She's been preparing for months. I thought of the phrase Scarlett had used in the hallway. We can proceed after visiting hours. She had meant it literally. What do we do now? I asked. Now we gather the last piece, the signed petition draft. We know she's hiding it somewhere close, likely her purse or locker. Letitia's phone buzzed. She checked the screen and nodded. Police will act once we have that document in hand. I leaned forward, whispering, Let me get it. Letitia frowned. No, Doris. I've spent 40 years cataloging secrets for other people, I said. I know how to handle paper. She won't see it coming. Letitia studied my face, then finally nodded. Okay, but be careful. She's clever. She's also careless when she feels certain, I replied. That evening I waited. Scarlett stepped out to make her usual call. I watched her reflection in the window as she walked toward the staff lounge, purse in hand. I followed after 30 seconds, silent as memory. The lounge was dim, vending machines humming softly. I could hear her voice through the cracked door, low, clipped, angry. I said tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. I'll sign the rest tonight. I slid inside quietly through the other door, staying low. She stood at the counter with her back to me. Her purse lay open on the chair beside her. A stack of papers peeked out, edges crisp and white. She turned suddenly. I grabbed a bottle of water from the machine and smiled like I just arrived. Oh, she said, startled. You scared me. I couldn't sleep, I said calmly. Needed some air. She studied me, but my tone was casual. I twisted the bottle open, sipping slowly. You're working late? Just catching up on paperwork, she said, sliding the papers deeper into her purse. I smiled gently. Always something to do. She left first. The moment her heels faded down the hall, I reached into the chair and pulled out a single page she had missed, half tucked beneath the strap. At the top, bold black letters. Guardianship petition, Robert Ingram. Beneath that, 2 signatures, Mark Delgado, attorney. Scarlett Ingram, petitioner. The page shook slightly in my hand. I slipped it into my coat pocket and returned to the room. Letitia met me halfway, eyes wide. I handed her the document wordlessly. She scanned it and exhaled. This is it, she said. This is the proof. Then it's time, I replied. By morning, the police were stationed discreetly in the hallway. Dr. Stevens had arranged for them to blend in as staff. Scarlett arrived at 9, radiant and unsuspecting. She carried a new purse, smaller, but her eyes darted toward the one still on the chair in the corner. She froze briefly, noticing the missing paper. Everything all right? I asked, voice light as tea steam. Yes, she said too quickly. Just thought I misplaced something. I smiled kindly. It happens to all of us. Letitia entered soon after with 2 officers and a hospital administrator. The room filled with silence thick enough to stop breath. Mrs. Ingram, Letitia said evenly. I need you to come with us, please. Scarlett blinked, her practiced calm beginning to crack. What's this about? Dr. Stevens stepped forward. We've confirmed irregularities in your husband's medication and unauthorized adjustments made by you. You are not allowed to leave the premises." Scarlett's mask shattered. "That's ridiculous. I was helping him." One of the officers produced a small evidence bag with labeled vials. "These were found in your personal belongings," he said. "Unprescribed, unlogged, and matching the substances found in your husband's system." Her face drained of color. She turned to me, eyes wide and desperate. "Doris, please. You know me. I love him." I stood slowly, my notebook in my hand. "Love doesn't need permission slips or poison," I said quietly. "And I know what I heard." She reached for me, but the officer stepped in, guiding her toward the door. She screamed once, an ugly broken sound that tore the air. I did not flinch. After she was gone, I sat by Robert's bedside again. The police took statements. Letitia filled out reports. But my focus was on the steady rhythm of his breathing. He looked peaceful, as if the storm had finally moved past. Dr. Stevens leaned in. "We'll keep him under observation. It may take a few days, but he's improving." "Thank you," I said softly, "for believing the small signs." He smiled. "Sometimes the smallest signs save lives." Later that afternoon, I went home for the first time in days. The house smelled of dust and memory. On the mantel sat a photo of Robert and Scarlett at their wedding, her dress gleaming, his smile wide and unguarded. I stared at it for a long moment before turning it face down. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table with my old legal pad. I began writing everything: dates, conversations, names, times. Every detail Letitia had told me to preserve. I called it the truth ledger. Each word steadied me. Each line pulled me further from shock and closer to purpose. At 6, Letitia called. "She's in custody," she said. "They're filing charges for attempted homicide and financial fraud. The attorney has already started talking. He's giving up the full scheme." I closed my eyes and breathed out. "And Robert?" "He's awake," she said. "He's asking for you." I didn't even grab a coat. I just went. When I walked into the hospital room, Robert's eyes were open. Dull with confusion, but open. He blinked twice, then whispered, "Mom." I rushed to his side. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." He looked around slowly. "Where's Scarlett?" The question sliced deep, but I didn't let it show. "She's gone for now. The doctors are taking care of everything." He frowned. "She said you were losing your mind. Said you were making up stories." I smiled sadly. "That's what people say when they're afraid of truth." He stared at me, searching my face. "Did she?" He couldn't finish the sentence. I squeezed his hand. "You rest. We'll talk when you're stronger." He nodded faintly. Tears slid down his cheek. "I'm sorry, Mom, for not listening sooner." "Don't you dare be sorry," I whispered. "You're alive. That's all that matters." He closed his eyes again, but this time in peace, not pain. Later that night, I sat in the chapel again. The same pew, the same flickering candlelight. I whispered, "Thank you for keeping him. Thank you for using small mercies." A nurse, a doctor, a voice that said, "Hide and wait." Because sometimes survival begins not with running or fighting, but with listening to the whisper that tells you to stay still until the truth catches up. I looked at my hands resting on my lap. Hands that had once held a newborn, washed dishes, filed papers, written letters. Now they held justice in their own quiet way. Tomorrow there would be police interviews, court forms, lawyers, reporters maybe. But tonight there was calm. Tonight there was gratitude. I touched my heart and whispered, "Not all silence is weakness. Some silence builds walls strong enough to hold justice." And somewhere down the corridor, I heard Letitia's footsteps, steady and sure, like the sound of faith in motion. The morning after Robert opened his eyes, the hospital felt different. The air no longer pressed on my chest. Nurses moved with purpose that felt like music. I stood at the window and whispered thank you under my breath, then turned toward the work that remained. Survival was a gift. Justice was an obligation. Detective Audrey arrived at 8 with a folder and an even gaze. She pulled 2 chairs close together so that we were knee to knee. Letitia stood by the door with her arms folded, a quiet sentry. "We have enough to charge Scarlett and her attorney," Audrey said. "The prosecutor is preparing counts for attempted homicide and fraud." Now we secure your position. That means paper. It also means a lawyer who works for you and only you. I nodded. I have someone. Her name is Lena Patel. We worked together years ago when I managed the archives. She knows deeds and wills better than anyone I have met. Call her, Audrey said. Tell her we need to move today. I dialed. Lena answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm and warm. Doris, I heard. Tell me where to be. I gave her the hospital address. She arrived in less than an hour wearing a navy suit and walking shoes. She hugged me tight and then shifted to business with the speed of a good surgeon. Scope, Lena said. What do we know and what do we need? Letitia spoke first. We have video of Scarlett handling the 4-line. We have a positive toxicology match from Dr. Stevens. We have a recorded confession from the hallway. We have a guardianship draft with signatures. Lena nodded and took notes on a legal pad. All right. Step 1. We file a revocation of any medical or financial authority Robert may have accidentally given his wife. Step 2. We file an emergency protective order to prevent her or any agent from contacting him or accessing his accounts. Step 3. We work with the bank to freeze any pending transfers that touch your funds, Doris. Step 4. We lodge a formal notice with the county recorder that any deed or title change initiated in the last 60 days is disputed and should be flagged. She looked up at me. You ready to sign a stack of paper? I am, I said. We moved to a small consultation room, and Lena laid out forms with yellow tabs. She had brought a portable scanner that hummed like a patient animal as each page fed through. First, Lena said, we revoke any power of attorney Robert may have signed. She handed me a form and then turned to Robert, who was sitting up now, pale but alert. Robert, can you sign? He held the pen with steady fingers and wrote his name. For a moment he stared at the curve of his signature, as if seeing himself return to the page of his own life. Next, Lena said, we designate a temporary medical proxy who is not Scarlett. Robert, do you want your mother for now? Yes, he whispered. His voice was hoarse but firm. Yes. Good, Lena said. Then we file an emergency order to protect both of you. She placed 3 more pages in front of me. Sign and date. Clear print. No shaky lines. I signed with slow care. Each stroke a small promise. Letitia slipped out and returned with a notary from admissions. The woman checked our identification, stamped each page with a crisp seal, and left with a gentle nod. Lena packed the originals in a red folder and slid copies to Audrey. Detective, we will file scans electronically within the hour and drop off hard copies downtown. Audrey nodded. The judge assigned to the case is fast on emergency matters. Expect orders by mid-afternoon. Lena turned to me again. We will also need to set 3 traps. 1 for money, 1 for paper, 1 for story. I raised my eyebrows. Explain. Money is about freezing and tracing. Paper is about beating any late filings or fake signatures. Story is about making the truth visible enough that no one can rewrite it while you sleep. She looked at Robert. For money we call your bank now. We freeze all joint activity. We notify their fraud unit and set up alerts for any attempts on your social security number. We place a 90-day hold on new lines of credit. For paper we file a formal notice with the county and the probate clerk. And we place a scan of your signature on file to block forgery. For story, we prepare a sworn declaration from you and from your mother, and we route it to the prosecutor to anchor the case record. Robert cleared his throat. Do it, he said. Do all of it. Lena made the calls from the room. She spoke to a bank manager and to a fraud analyst. She spoke to a clerk at the recorder. She spoke to a probate liaison who remembered her from past cases and promised to stamp our notice before lunch. I watched her draw a map that turned chaos into an order I could recognize. By noon it was all filed. Audrey texted that a judge had granted the protection orders and flagged the deeds. The wheels were turning in the right direction. Now we set the last trap, Lena said quietly. The one for story. She looked at Letitia. Nurse, would your team be willing to put together a simple timeline for the prosecutor? Nothing fancy. Just a clean account of dates, observations, and changes in medication. Letitia nodded. I can have that by end of day. Lena turned to me. Doris, I want you to write a plain statement. No poetry. No anger. Just facts. Start with when you got the call. End with the moment you learned from the doctor that the substance was found. Keep it clean. Keep it human. Your voice will carry weight with the jury. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small notebook I had been keeping. The truth ledger. I tore out a fresh page and began. At 4:14 I received a call. At 5:12 I arrived at the hospital. At 5:19 a nurse told me to hide and wait. At 5:20 I heard a conversation in the hall. The woman described what she had given my son. The man told her to sign documents. I did not speak. I recorded what I saw. At 6:23 I learned that the doctor had found the substance in the 4-bag. I stayed with my son. I did not interfere with staff. I waited for the police. I slid the page to Lena. She smiled. This is exactly what we need. In the afternoon Audrey returned with news. The attorney is talking, she said. He has provided emails and drafts of documents. He claims Scarlett pushed him. He wants a reduced sentence. Lena did not look impressed. He can ask. The facts will decide. Audrey nodded. He also confirmed that Scarlett used a separate phone for sensitive calls. We have a warrant pending. If we get that phone, we get the rest of the plan. Robert closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were clear. I want to help, he said. I want to do something more than lie in this bed. You will, Lena said. There is a hearing in 2 days to formalize the orders and to set conditions for release. I want you on record. Short and precise. You will tell the judge that you do not consent to any guardianship, that you do not authorize your wife to make decisions, and that you support the charges. You will say it once and with calm. He nodded. I can do that. Then Lena looked at me. Doris, there is another step. Harder than paper. You will have to clean your house of any keys she kept. You will need to change passwords, PINs, and security questions. You will need to visit the bank and put your signature on a no-phone change list. You will need to move any keepsakes she might try to use as leverage into a safe deposit box. Bring your marriage certificate, your birth certificate, and the deed copy with you. Keep one set at the bank and one set with me. I felt the old archivist rise inside me. I will color code the folders, I said. Legal, medical, personal. Lena smiled. I knew you would. That evening I went home for the first real hour since the arrest. The house was quiet in a way that did not ache. I opened windows and let in clean air. I gathered letters, bonds, and photographs. I made labels with my bold black marker. Legal, medical, personal. I tucked Walter's watch into a velvet bag and slid my wedding album into a storage bin. I changed the locks and left a spare key with Ms. Joyce across the street. I reset passwords and set a freeze at the credit bureau sites. I set bank alerts to ping Lena and me together if anything shifted by a single dollar that did not make sense. When I finished, I stood in the center of my living room and felt taller than I had in months. Truth is not a sword, I thought. Truth is a ledger that balances over time. The next morning, Lena picked me up before sunrise and drove downtown. We filed a victim statement with the district attorney. We handed over copies of everything. Audrey met us in the corridor and walked us to a small conference room where a paralegal scanned our documents again with careful hands. On the wall hung a framed sentence that read equal justice under law. Words can feel like paint. For once those words felt like structure. We returned to the hospital for a minute of quiet with Robert before the hearing. He looked stronger. His face had color. He asked for orange juice and then laughed at himself and asked for water instead. We both laughed with him, the kind of laugh that releases something stuck behind the ribs. I squeezed his hand. You ready? He nodded. Ready. At the courthouse, the hallway buzzed with voices. Lena guided us to a bench near the back. Audrey arrived in a gray suit with a stack of files. Across the aisle, a deputy led Scarlett into the room in plain clothes with a blank expression. Her eyes found me. For a second the mask slipped and I saw something like surprise that I had not crumbled. The judge entered and the room stood. The clerk called the case. The prosecutor spoke first, laying out the medical report, the video timestamps, the audio recording, and the paper trail. Lena's filings were referenced and attached. Then the defense asked for release on bond. He argued community ties and a claim of misunderstanding. He avoided the word evidence as if it burned. The judge listened without expression. Then he turned to Robert. Mr. Ingram, do you wish to be heard? Robert stood with care and stepped to the lectern. He placed both hands on the wood and met the judge's eyes. Your Honor, I do not consent to any guardianship. I do not authorize my wife to make decisions for me. I support the charges brought by the state. I ask that my mother be recognized as my medical proxy until I am fully cleared by my doctor. I ask that my accounts remain protected, and that any property transfers be blocked. He paused. His voice did not waver. I am alive because people paid attention. I need time to heal without fear. The judge nodded once. Request granted. Bond is denied. Protection orders remain in place. No contact with the victim or his mother. All financial activities are frozen pending review. The matter will be set for preliminary hearing in 4 weeks. A murmur rippled through the room. Scarlett did not move. She stared at the floor, jaw clenched, eyes flat. Lena touched my elbow. One step at a time, she whispered. Outside the courtroom, a local reporter waited by the steps. She recognized Audrey first and then saw me with Lena and Robert. She approached carefully. Mrs. Ingram, she said, would you like to say a word for families who might be facing something similar? No names will be used on air without permission. I looked at Lena. She nodded. One sentence, she said. Make it plain. I faced the camera. Pay attention to the small things, I said. If something feels wrong, write it down. Ask a nurse who listens. Ask a doctor who explains. Ask the law to do its part. Not all silence is weakness. Sometimes it is the start of a plan. The reporter lowered her mic and thanked me. I felt no rush of victory, only a quiet alignment between what I knew and what the world was beginning to see. We spent the afternoon at the bank. A manager led us to a glass office and closed the door. He reviewed Lena's letters and the court order. He moved through screens with efficient hands. Alerts were set. Access was narrowed. A fraud note was placed on the account that would ring a bell if anyone tried to prod the edges. When we finished, he said something I will not forget. Money flows to noise. Safety sits with patient people. You chose safety. That evening I invited Miss Joyce and Mr. Earl to the house. We ate stew and cornbread at my kitchen table. I told them what I could and asked them not to gossip the pieces beyond the truth. Miss Joyce patted my hand and said, "Baby, we will hold you in prayer and in privacy." Mr. Earl nodded and said, "If you need a ride to court, you call me." I slept for 4 hours that night and then woke to a strange quiet. It took me a moment to realize the quiet belonged to me and not to fear. I brewed tea and opened my notebook. I drafted a letter to the congregation for Pastor Lawrence to read on Sunday. It said this: protect your elders. Trust your nurses. Thank your doctors. Teach your sons that love is not blindness. Teach your daughters that power is not control. Bring receipts. Keep faith. Ask for help early. On the third morning, Lena and Audrey called a joint meeting in a small county office to set the path to trial. The prosecutor sat at the head of a long table and spoke in a steady tone. We will file a clean case. We will not overcharge. We will not rush. We will center the victim and the truth. We will also file a parallel civil action for asset protection, so that this family does not suffer financial harm while the case proceeds. I exhaled a breath I had been holding for days. The plan was bigger than anger. It was thorough. It was kind. Before we left, Letitia asked if she could speak. The prosecutor nodded. Letitia said, "I have served in hospitals for 15 years. I have never seen a mother listen with such discipline and such grace. The hallway recording is powerful, but her patience saved her son. I would like that noted for the record." The prosecutor wrote a line on his legal pad and underlined it. He looked at me and said, "Mrs. Ingram, you will be called brave many times. Today I will say something else. You were careful. Careful wins cases. Brave sometimes only makes noise." On the ride back to the hospital, I watched the city pass in winter light. Traffic moved. People crossed at corners. A boy carried a trumpet case taller than his arm. Life did what life does. Kept going. I walked into Robert's room and found him sitting up with a book. He looked up and smiled. He said, "I feel like I have been underwater for a long time and finally found the surface." I sat and took his hand. "Tomorrow we start therapy," he said. "The doctor says short walks and simple meals and a schedule." He grinned. "No more juice from anyone." We both laughed. The sound was simple and clean. That night I stood on my porch and looked at the sky. It held no sign and offered no warning. It was just a roof over a day that had turned in our favor. I breathed in and spoke aloud, not to the air but to the lineage of women who had stood on porches before me and spoken to what they could not see. We are not done, I said. But we are steady. We are ready for the light. Inside my phone buzzed. A message from Lena. Preliminary hearing in 4 weeks. Press interest is growing. We will keep it modest and factual. Rest while you can. I set the phone down and made chamomile tea. I opened my notebook and wrote a final line for the day. Trap set. Papers filed. Doors locked. Hearts open. The courthouse hallway smelled of coffee and anxiety. Reporters milled outside, cameras resting on their shoulders, waiting for something worth catching. I tightened my scarf and adjusted my glasses, moving slowly beside Lena. The day felt heavier than the ones before. Truth has its own weight when it's about to be spoken aloud. Remember, Lena whispered. You don't owe them a performance. Just clarity. I nodded. Clarity I can do. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Scarlett sat at the defense table, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched white. Her lawyer whispered to her, but she didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on me, and for the first time I saw no calculation, only panic wearing a brave face. The judge entered, calling the room to order. The hearing today was open to the public. The prosecutor, Ms. Ellison, stood with confidence that didn't need noise. She laid out every fact like laying bricks. Medical reports, timestamps, voice recordings, financial documents. Every piece of Scarlett's careful deceit was displayed under the light of procedure. I sat behind Lena watching my name appear on the screens, each form stamped, notarized, official. My handwriting on the truth ledger was entered as Exhibit 12. When my turn came to testify, the bailiff called my name. My knees trembled, but not from fear. From the understanding that years of love and silence were about to become public record. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Ingram, the prosecutor began gently, can you tell us what happened the night you arrived at the hospital? I took a slow breath. I was running down the hallway. I thought my son was dying. A nurse stopped me. She told me to hide and wait. I did. From that small room, I heard my daughter-in-law and a man talking about guardianship papers, about my son's accounts, about ways to make it easier for him to stay asleep. The room went still. What did you do next? Miss Ellison asked. I stayed quiet. I listened. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't unhear it. Later, the nurse, Letitia, told me she had already been suspicious. She tested the 4-bag. The result was positive for a substance that wasn't prescribed. After that, I recorded everything. Every word. Every visit. I wrote it all down. When the police came, I handed them the evidence. Miss Ellison nodded. You handled yourself calmly, Mrs. Ingram. Most people would have confronted her. I met her gaze. Silence can be louder than shouting when you use it right. There was a ripple of murmurs from the gallery. Neighbors, church friends, faces I'd known half my life. People who'd baked casseroles with me and sung hymns beside me. I wondered if they were shocked or simply sad. The defense attorney rose. Mrs. Ingram, you said you overheard a conversation. Couldn't you have misheard? Hospitals are loud places. I smiled faintly. Hospitals are loud, yes. But betrayal has a very distinct sound. It's quieter. Intentional. He shifted. And you recorded this conversation? Yes. Without her consent? Yes. Because when someone is plotting a crime, they don't deserve the courtesy of privacy. He looked annoyed but moved on. You said the nurse found traces of medication. Did you personally see the test results? I did not need to. I saw the man my son became when the poison left his blood. That was enough proof for me. The judge leaned forward, tone firm but fair. Answer stands. I looked over at Scarlett. She stared at the table, jaw tight, pretending to be small. For years she'd filled my home with her laughter, with charm so practiced I mistook it for grace. Now her silence was her confession. When my testimony ended, the prosecutor introduced the audio file. Scarlett's voice played through the speakers, calm, confident, damning. I've been giving him a little each morning. Only a pinch. He looks tired. The doctors nod. No one suspects a thing. The words filled the room like smoke. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some gasped. The judge's pen froze mid-note. I didn't look away. I wanted her to know I was hearing her without flinching. After the recording, Letitia testified next. She detailed the chemical findings, the chain of custody, the day she made the call to Detective Audrey. Her professionalism left no cracks for doubt. When she finished, she turned and smiled softly at me. I nodded, gratitude held behind composure. The prosecution rested its case. The defense asked for an adjournment but was denied. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. Lena moved between them like a shield, but one microphone still caught me. Mrs. Ingram, the reporter asked, what do you want people to take from this? I thought for a second. That a calm woman is not a weak one. That when someone tries to erase you, write everything down. That evening, the local news aired a short segment. My voice played over footage of the courthouse steps. Neighbors stopped me in the grocery store the next day to whisper, "We saw you, Doris. We're proud of you." The church bulletin carried a small line. Our sister Doris Ingram and her son Robert are in our prayers as truth prevails. By the end of the week, letters began arriving. Some from strangers, some from women who had lived their own quiet wars. One from Mississippi read, I heard your story and remembered my own. Thank you for standing tall for the rest of us. I kept every letter in a blue folder marked Voices That Believe. But beneath the strength, grief lived quietly. The grief of being betrayed not by an enemy but by family. Late at night, I would wake from shallow dreams and remember Scarlett's laughter at Thanksgiving, her arms around me when Walter passed. Love turned counterfeit doesn't lose all its warmth. It just burns differently when you hold it too long. 2 weeks later, Lena called. The trial's been fast-tracked, she said. Given the evidence, the prosecutor expects a plea. Will there be a statement? I asked. Yes. The judge will read your written words if you prefer not to speak again. I considered that. No, I said. I'll read them myself. The day of sentencing, the courthouse was packed. Robert walked in beside me, cane in hand, steadier now. The air hummed with whispers. Scarlett sat at the table again, this time without makeup, her hair pulled back tightly. Her lawyer whispered, plea deal, and she nodded once. When the judge called the case, the plea was entered, guilty. Attempted murder, fraud, forgery, all acknowledged. The room seemed to exhale. Before sentencing, the judge offered me the floor for a victim statement. I stood, unfolding the paper Lena had helped me type. I came here today not for revenge, I began, but for restoration. My son was almost erased by someone who said she loved him. I was almost silenced by fear of being called crazy, old, or bitter. But I learned something. Truth doesn't age and it doesn't apologize. I looked at Scarlett. You could have chosen mercy. You could have asked for help. Instead, you chose deceit. I will not hate you. Hate is heavy and I have carried enough. But I will never forget. The law will decide your time. God will decide your peace. The courtroom was silent when I sat down. Even the air felt reverent. The judge spoke next, his tone low but sure. Mrs. Ingram, your composure honors this court. Justice must be as deliberate as your patience. Then he turned to Scarlett. You are sentenced to 20 years. You will receive treatment, counseling, and no contact with the victims. The state thanks Nurse Letitia Sanchez and Dr. Stevens for their integrity. As the gavel struck, I felt the world tilt back toward balance. Outside, the sky opened into sunlight. Reporters called my name again, but I waved them off. Lena walked beside me, holding her briefcase like a badge of quiet triumph. You did it, she said softly. No, I said. We did it. Every woman who's been doubted, dismissed, or delayed, we all did. We drove home in silence. The city rolled by, ordinary and alive. At a red light, Robert turned to me. I still can't believe it's over. It's never over, I said gently. But it's changing. When we reached the house, the porch light was still on. Miss Joyce had left a plate of peach cobbler covered with foil and a note. For strength, not for sorrow. I smiled. She always knows what people need. That evening, our living room filled with quiet warmth. Letitia dropped by after her shift. She brought her daughter, a bright-eyed college student named Tessa, who was studying forensic science. She wanted to meet the woman who turned evidence into art, Letitia said. Tessa laughed nervously. Ma says you're legendary. I chuckled. I'm just old enough to know that patience wins wars. Robert sat in his recliner, pale but peaceful. Letitia poured tea for us all, and the sound of clinking cups felt like the first normal rhythm in weeks. The smell of peach and cinnamon wrapped the air. When they left, I walked to the back porch and looked at the yard. Overgrown, waiting for spring. Fireflies blinked low in the grass. I thought of Walter, of how he used to say, "The truth always finds light, Doris. It just takes its sweet time." The stars were faint, but they were there. I leaned on the railing and whispered, "It found us, Walter. It finally found us." 3 days later, a local newspaper ran a front-page story titled, "Mother's Quiet Courage Ends Guardianship Scheme." The subheadline read, "Her calm uncovered betrayal, saved her son, and changed hospital protocols across the county." They quoted Letitia. "Sometimes justice begins with a woman who decides to wait and watch instead of shout." When I saw it, I folded the paper and placed it in the Blue Voices That Believe folder. Not as a trophy but as a record. A testament that silence, when guided by strength, can speak louder than the loudest lies. That night, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, lines, gray strands, eyes steady. I smiled at her. "You waited, you listened, and you survived." The house creaked softly in the night air. The past no longer echoed, it rested. The future, still unknown, hummed with a kind of peace I hadn't felt since before the betrayal. I turned off the light, letting the quiet stay, not as a void, but as a companion earned by truth. The morning after the sentencing, the house felt like it had exhaled. I woke before the sun and stood in my kitchen with the window cracked, listening to the first birds argue about the day. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Ordinary sounds felt new, like the house had been waiting to be itself again. I brewed tea and touched the edge of the counter where I used to steady myself during nights that would not end. I did not need to steady myself now. I stood without leaning. That simple fact made me close my eyes and whisper a quiet thank you. Robert came by mid-morning with a bag of groceries and a shy smile I had not seen since he was a teenager. He unpacked eggs, greens, and a small bouquet of tulips. He set them in the old green vase like a ceremony. He moved slower, his strength still building, but his eyes were clear. We cooked omelets and laughed when the first one folded messy. We ate at the table with the light on our faces and did not speak about the past until we had finished our plates and washed the dishes. When we spoke, we used short sentences that felt like stones placed carefully across a stream. "I am sorry," he said. "I know," I said. "I am going to keep walking toward you," he said. "I will be on the path with you," I said. He nodded, and the fear that had lived behind his eyes loosened its grip. He took out a yellow folder and placed it between us. I opened it and found a personal repayment plan he had drafted with Lena. Monthly deposits back to my savings, a timeline for interest, a promise to manage the business with clean books and regular audits. It was not a performance. It was a ledger of respect. I touched his hand. "I will accept this," I said. "Not because I asked you to pay me back, but because you want to stand up in your own life." He breathed in and the room seemed to grow larger. He told me about therapy sessions the hospital had arranged, about walks around the lake, about the way his chest loosened each time he chose truth over shame. He did not speak her name. I did not need him to. We had given enough breath to what tried to bury us. In the afternoon I walked to Ms. Joyce and Mr. Earl with a plate of cornbread. We sat on their porch and watched school buses rattle by. They asked gentle questions and then let the quiet hold us. Mr. Earl said, "When good men and women mind the small things, big storms run out of thunder." Ms. Joyce said, "The Lord heard you before you spoke." I believed both statements at once. On Sunday, Pastor Lawrence invited us to stand for a blessing. The sanctuary was full. People who had prayed for us turned their faces toward us, not hungry for gossip now, but full of relief. The choir sang a soft hymn about light that finds a way into dark rooms. I felt Walter beside me the way you feel a coat settle across your shoulders. Heavy enough to comfort, light enough to let you move. That week, Letitia visited with her daughter Tessa. We ate in the backyard where the air held the faint smell of cut grass. Robert asked Tessa about her classes. She lit up as she described case analysis, chain of custody, and how to read small shifts in vital signs. She spoke like someone who had found a road with her name painted on it. When she finished, she turned to me and asked, "What kept you steady when fear was loud?" Lists, I said. T. Scripture, the sound of my own steps on the floor when the house was quiet. And the faces of people who tell the truth even when it costs them. You will be one of those people. Her eyes shone like a promise had been placed in them. Letitia squeezed my hand under the table and did not need to say a word. Detective Audrey called to say the case had inspired new hospital protocols for visitor access and pharmacy controls. She thanked me and I told her the thanks belonged to the nurse who noticed, to the doctor who listened, and to a department that chose patience over speed. She laughed softly and said, "It also belongs to a mother who knew the value of a well-kept note." Lena met me downtown the next day to finalize documents for asset protection and to outline the civil case that would recover legal fees and prevent future claims. We sat in a conference room with glass walls and a view of ordinary traffic. Lena moved through the stack like a pianist. Calm hands, no wasted motion. At the end she closed her pen and said, "The law will keep doing its part. Now you decide what life looks like when paper no longer takes all your breath." I went home and opened a clean notebook. On the first page I wrote 3 lines. Protect what I have. Serve who I can. Rest without apology. I underlined each word until the ink sat dark and sure. Robert suggested a small public gathering at the community center to thank the hospital staff and to share what we had learned. I hesitated. I did not want to turn our life into a show. He said, "Not a show, a service. There are people who need to know what to look for. People like me who think tired is just tired. People like you who fear no one will believe them." His eyes did not plead. They stated a truth. I agreed. We printed simple flyers. Nothing dramatic. Just a date, a time, and a sentence. Learn the signs. Bring a notebook. We asked Pastor Lawrence to open with a prayer, and we asked Dr. Stevens and Letitia to speak. Detective Audrey offered a brief segment on evidence and safety. Lena brought a 1-page guide to emergency filings and how to find free legal help. The room filled before the hour. Grandmothers with paper fans. Deacons in neat suits. Nurses off shift in sneakers. A young couple who held hands like a rope in a storm. We set a long table with coffee and lemon bars. The local paper sent a reporter, but he sat near the back and did not interrupt. We began on time. Pastor Lawrence read from Proverbs about wisdom and watchfulness. Dr. Stevens explained what anticoagulants do in the body and how symptoms hide behind words like stress and fatigue. Letitia spoke about her sister and how grief trained her eyes. There was a catch in her voice that did not seek pity. It simply told the truth. Audrey explained how to preserve a chain of custody with a simple phone video and a timestamp note. Lena walked through the language of forms so they would not sound like thunder in the ears of a person who is already scared. Then it was my turn. I stood behind a small lectern that wobbled slightly. I placed my palm on it until it steadied. I told them I was not there to relive hurt. I was there to say what helped. I told them not to argue with a person who spends their life in manipulation. I told them to observe and write. I told them to ask a nurse who listens and a doctor who explains. I told them to memorize the sentence, "Not all silence is weakness." I told them that the quiet days that follow justice do not feel like fireworks. They feel like laundry hung in clean air. They feel like waking without dread. They feel like making breakfast without a knot in your throat. When I finished, a woman about my age stood and asked, "What if your son will not listen until it is almost too late?" I said, "Then you will love him in full sentences. You will bring him facts like bread and water. You will not try to win a debate. You will invite him to safety, and you will keep inviting him until he is ready to step through the door. We are mothers. We know how to stand in a doorway and keep it open with our bodies." I saw heads nod around the room like tall grass in wind. The reporter wiped his eyes and pretended to scratch his nose. We ended with prayer and then we ate lemon bars and shook hands. People pressed letters into my palm. The blue folder that held messages from strangers grew heavy and good. In the weeks that followed, Robert returned to work 3 days a week. He kept therapy twice a week and walked in the evenings. He came by on Sundays with groceries and stayed to fold laundry and fix what needed fixing. He replaced the porch light and tightened the wobbly dining chair. Truss grew like ivy, slow and steady, covering old rough places with green. Scarlett appealed for bond and was denied. Her attorney filed 2 papers that did not move the judge. I read neither. Lena sent short updates that ended with the words "handled" and "no action required." My shoulders lowered a fraction with each note. One Saturday I drove to the ocean alone. I had not done that in years. I parked and walked the boardwalk with a cup of coffee. The air smelled like salt and promise. Mothers gathered toddlers into sun hats. Teenagers moved in clusters, trying not to look like children. A man played the saxophone near the rail, low and worn like a voice that has told the truth too many nights to care whether anyone clapped. I sat on a bench and wrote in my notebook. I wrote about Walter and how his laughter used to drop into a room like a warm coin in a cold pocket. I wrote about my mother and the day she taught me to lock the front door with my chin up, not with fear. I wrote about Letitia and how courage sometimes enters a story through a side door. I wrote about nurses who hold both science and compassion without letting either drop. I wrote about detectives who keep small words honest. I wrote about a son who told a judge I need time to heal without fear. The ink dried in the sea air and did not smear when a breeze turned the page. Back home, I planted marigolds in a row under the front window. Their color was loud like joy that does not whisper to be polite. I knelt in the dirt and felt the earth cool against my palms. I thought about the women who would come after me and stand in their kitchens holding a phone and trying to breathe. I wished I could place a cup of tea in each hand. Since I could not, I kept writing. We opened a small fund at the community center to cover the cost of notarizations, certified mail, and transportation for families in crisis. We called it the Watchful Hands Fund. Letitia designed a one-page checklist for nurses who see and suspect. Dr. Stevens recorded a short video for local clinics about symptoms that look like stress but do not behave like stress. Audrey set up a hotline hour on Wednesdays where someone would listen and explain next steps. Lena recruited 2 young attorneys who wanted to fight for the quiet. The first person we helped was a man who had signed a paper he did not understand. The second was a woman who kept losing her phone to a cousin, who wanted her disability deposit. The third was a grandmother raising twins who needed to protect a small trust left by a neighbor. Each case was not dramatic to the world. Each case was everything to the person living it. We moved slowly and we did not promise more than we could do. We kept our word and we kept our notes. On the night of the first anniversary of the day I ran down that hallway, Robert and I sat on the back steps with bowls of peach ice cream. Fireflies stitched little lights in the grass. He said, "Mom, tell me one memory from when I was 5 that I do not know I have." I told him about the time he tried to make breakfast for me and cracked eggs on the floor, and arranged the shells in a careful circle because he thought beauty might keep me from being upset. He laughed and put his head on my shoulder for a long moment. He said, "Tell me what you learned this year." I said, "I learned that fear can ride in the back seat without grabbing the wheel. I learned that a clear sentence spoken once can redirect a room. I learned that I am not alone even when I think I am. I learned that rest is a form of praise." He nodded and did not try to add to the list. He did not need to. A few days later, the church invited me to speak at a women's brunch. I wore a simple dress and my comfortable shoes. I told a room of mothers and aunties and godmothers that resilience is not something you buy. It is something you practice in small acts. In how you set the table. In how you answer the phone. In how you write the date at the top of a page before you tell the truth on it. At the end I asked them a question the channel would later ask our viewers. Did you like my story? Where are you listening from? What do you want to hear next that will help you feel less alone? Women laughed softly and raised their hands. Some said Chicago, Memphis, Mobile, and one said the room felt like home. We ate chicken salad and lemon cake and exchanged numbers and recipes. Community felt like a quilt pulled up to the chin on a cold night. The civil case closed quietly in our favor. Legal fees were reimbursed. A small portion of business profits that had been funneled toward a private account was returned. Lena sent a final email with a single sentence. Ledger balanced. I printed it and placed it in the blue folder with the letters from strangers. I did not frame it. I did not need to. The balance was not in the paper. It was in my breath. One evening near dusk, I walked past the mirror in the hallway and stopped. The woman looking back had more gray at her temples and softer lines at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes were steady. She did not appear smaller for what she had endured. She looked proportioned to her life. I said aloud, "You are not a victim. You are a witness who lived." I felt the truth of it land in the room like a small bright stone. Sometimes the past visits in dreams. When it does, I let it sit a while and then I offer it tea. I do not wrestle it anymore. It takes the cup, drinks, and leaves before morning. The house keeps its shape in the dark and greets me the same way when I wake. Floorboards light through the blinds, kettle heating, quiet that belongs to me. If you are listening to this and you feel the first tug that something is wrong, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not crazy. You are not alone. Write the date. Write what you see. Ask one nurse one precise question. Ask one doctor to explain one number on a page. Tell one friend who respects your mind. If your voice shakes, that is fine. Speak slow. Steady beats loud. Truth does not need an echo to be true. Our channel will keep telling stories like this because stories are a map when people have lost the road. If this one gave you strength, share it with someone who needs a hand to hold. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Tell me one small thing you did this week that made you feel like yourself again. I will be reading. I will be cheering. I am Doris. I am a mother who learned to wait when waiting was the bravest act available. I am a woman who learned that a ledger and a prayer can live on the same page. I am a neighbor who will bring cornbread when the day has worn you out. I am a witness who believes that light finds its way, even when the corridor bends and the door is hard to see. The night before the foundation opened its small office at the community center, I set the green vase with new tulips on the desk. I placed a stack of blank forms in a tray labeled "Start Here." I wrote a sign in thick marker and taped it by the door. Said, "Come in. Sit down. We believe you." Then I locked the door and walked out into a city that did not know me and did not need to. A city that would keep waking up and going to work and buying bus passes. The sky was lavender at the edges. The air smelled like rain on the way. I felt ready for what would arrive, steady enough for what would not, and grateful for the hour between. That is how the story closes for now. Not with trumpets. With a set table. With a porch light that works. With a son who knocks and does not need to be asked twice to sit. With nurses who trust their eyes. With a lawyer who files and does not flinch. With a detective who puts small facts together like someone mending lace. With a congregation that prays without making a spectacle of it. With a woman who learned that her quiet was never emptiness. It was room saved for truth.